The gay cake row is back in the news. Some MLAs now think we should change the law to introduce a conscience clause to protect individuals and companies such as Asher's Bakery, who refused to bake a cake with a pro-gay marriage slogan on it. Some are now calling that an Asher's clause. Speaking in a Stormont Committee meeting yesterday, the DUP's MLA Stephen Moutry said many small businesses had contacted him expressing fears that the Equality Commission's controversial action against Asher's Bakery could have serious implications for them. And he accused the Commission of wasting public money on the case, which he said was using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Your organisation's reputation has gone down the tubes. This isn't even a Northern Ireland case. You left the Daily Mail last week and there were 2 pages, allocated to this. I'm not going to say anything more than that. If it's a David and Goliath situation, I'll tell you, I hope David comes out top at the end of the day. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
That's Stephen Moutry, and the Equality Commission have told us they're unavailable to join our conversation this lunchtime. But we really do want to ask a serious question about whether we should be changing our laws now because of a row about the icing on a cake. Wouldn't a change in equality laws to get a conscience opt-out for some people be tantamount to legalising discrimination? What do you think? You can also tweet at BBC Talkback. Brendan Duddy Jr. is the chairman of the City Hotel Group in Derry. Fiona Donnelly is with me in the studio, a solicitor, and Callum Webster is here also from the Christian Institute. Callum, what do you think? A conscience clause?
Well, we've got to look at what is happening in this situation. It's not simply about Asher's Baking Company. The Equality Commission is funded with public money to the tune of millions every year. And here we have small family-run businesses who are being taken to court and threatened with legal action whenever they seek to apply their sincerely held conscience. Asher's Baking Company are happy to serve anybody a sausage roll, a Cornish pasty, a jammy donut, regardless
we'll
of
get to the obesity conversation in a minute.
Regardless of their sexual lifestyle, regardless of their political beliefs, regardless of their race, regardless of their background, their community background, they will serve anybody ordinary items of confectionery. But to design and decorate a cake in support of a highly politicised campaign is asking people to go against their conscience, and it's tantamount to bullying that the Equality Commission, with its millions of pounds, can threaten a small family-run bakery in this manner.
So is that a yes to a conscience clause?
I do support a conscience clause for small businesses.
And you think it would work in practice?
Well, you've got to see how law works out and how it applies. As you well know, law is applied through case law. Statute is passed by politicians, but case law determines the shape of that law and how it impacts on particular situations. But we do provide and protect people's consciences in other areas throughout the United Kingdom. We have conscience clauses for teachers in schools in England so that an atheist teacher is not forced to lead a religious assembly in a school. We already accommodate that and have done that for many years, and there are other areas of service provision where that happens as well.
Yes, I'm thinking of nurses and doctors who are opposed to abortion, for example.
Yeah, that's
they have
another
a conscience
example.
protection there, yeah. Fiona Donnelly, legally, is this possible? Can the Assembly do this?
Well, it's possible, but there are difficulties with it, and I suppose it's interesting what Callum's saying there about, the statute makes the law and then the case law works it out. That's a very expensive way to do things. If you're going to try every angle on this, and it really is, where does the conscience end?
Yes.
And whose conscience is it?
And we can anticipate some problems. What if an atheist baker didn't want to make a cake with a Christian slogan on it?
Exactly. And what
would that
if,
be protected?
What if it is the company's ethos, the company's firmly held belief? Is that the employee's firmly held belief? And just where does that stop? And I mean, you had a case a few years ago in Scotland with midwives who were opposed to abortion, but they were actually just dealing with an administrative part of the work, and it was held, well, look, that isn't actually contributing to the abortion itself. So there are all sorts of edges to this, and it's a very difficult thing to impose, and it would be very costly to work out every case and every individual circumstance.
But if the Assembly decided they wanted to go this way, is there any other law out there in terms of equality law, human rights law, which is not a devolved matter, of course, in Northern Ireland, that would form a problem for them?
Well, there's the existing law which prevents discrimination. So if you're sidestepping that, if you like, then yes, that would cause a difficulty.
Do you think this is tantamount to legalising discrimination, a conscience clause?
It could be. It could be. It could be a way to do it, and it just depends how far it goes.
Of course, those who are arguing for it say that's not what they're proposing. They're proposing protecting people who have sincerely held beliefs that are different to other people. Brendan Duddy is in our Foyle studio. Good afternoon to you, Brendan. Obviously a businessman, you want to get as many customers as possible. What do you make of a conscience law, a conscience provision that would enable some businesses to turn away business?
Again, as Fiona stated there, I think it's very difficult in a context of, generally normal rules apply, and it's a level of balance ultimately in this. Where does someone's own conscience step over to someone else's rights? I think most people support all gay and lesbian rights to be equal in our society. I don't think there can be very much. I think we all certainly do.
Well, not everybody agrees with that.
Well, that's what my opinion is. But
yeah, I understand.
In terms of this law, I think it's very difficult. I think that if the Equality Commission were trying to settle the difference between two opposing sides, I don't know if going to court's the right way about it. I don't think it's going to actually bring those sides closer together. And I think maybe a discussion between the sides should have been maybe tried first. I don't know if it was.
And the Equality Commission, of course, their position is that they're not trying to resolve this. It's for the courts to determine whether the law has been breached, and they're testing that point. It's not their job to enforce the law.
But a lot of businesses, very big banks, some banks will not have anything to do with gambling. So if I was a gambler with loads of money, can I then go to the Equality Commission and say, take that bank to court because they won't have anything to do with gambling? Where do you draw the line is the point on this. At what point is it, there's no room for any discrimination at all. But at what point do you find a different way of dealing with somebody than, as Fiona said, go to court for every single action? I mean, where would this could end up costing, I don't know, a serious amount of money.
So Brendan, to summarise your position, if I can, as a businessman, you're opposed to the idea of a conscience clause.
I think it'd be very risky in the point of view of saying that, that it automatically meant you could do what you want. I think that's probably worse than the alternative.
And is there a concern in your mind that you could be imposing, one company could be imposing its sincerely held beliefs, the owners of a company, on its customers with a conscience clause?
Again, it's a question of balance. If I go back to the bank that won't do anything to do with gambling, they won't have customers that are in any gambling businesses. So they are imposing what their position is on anybody who is a potential customer. Is that different than somebody who has another belief?
Fiona?
I just think one of the things you have to be careful about is that gamblers as such aren't protected, so there are specific people protected under the equality legislation. So it's really in relation to overriding those protections that you need to be careful. I mean, if people choose to gamble, they're not a category that are
so
protected.
So we're really talking
about
people's religious, political, moral beliefs here and the protection of them. Callum, would you be comfortable with a conscience clause protecting an atheist owner of a business who turns away Christians?
Well, if Christians go to a particular baker or printer or whatever and ask for that firm to design literature or campaign slogans for them, then that business provider should have the liberty, a small business should have the liberty to say, well, look, I don't agree with those views, I don't want to do it. We live in a market economy, and if we're not forced to go to particular baker shops, we're not forced to go to particular businesses in society as a whole. The beauty of a market economy is you can go to another service provider who will be more in tune with your ethos and with your beliefs.
And you're being logically consistent.
And in a society where the Equality Commission is supposed to champion diversity and champion tolerance, we've got to tolerate the views of service providers. They are real people as well. You can't just tell them that they have to divorce their beliefs and their position from the service they provide.
Sorry to interrupt you. The upshot of your position, Callum, is the Christian Institute would be defending a law that enabled people to discriminate against Christians. Well, you're okay with that?
Well, Christians don't have, or any group in society doesn't have an automatic right to go to a service provider and demand that they produce material for a particular campaign. And if that means that there's a particular printer won't print Christian material or gospel tracts, that's fine. I mean, we live in a society in Northern Ireland where we respect one another's views. Nobody would go to a bakery on the Shankill and say design a cake and decorate a cake and print slogans on it that say support a united Ireland. And likewise, nobody would go to a bakery on the Falls Road and demand that they design a cake saying no popery here. We respect one another. That's what true tolerance does. You've got to allow liberty for people to decline custom, and that's what a conscience clause would protect and would provide for.
08459 555 678. Let's take some of your calls on this. Ian, you're up first. Good afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon. I can't understand this. This is what we call the law gone bad. Why we could if you go into a pub and under the thing that it says that management reserves the right to refuse to serve any person whom the management doesn't want in the shop, they could so and yet you have I can't even understand it. Why didn't the people that got from Asher's that's okay, sorry, get for ball, and you go and get somebody else to do it. The law has gone completely mad, quite honestly. But quite honest, look after it this way. God looks after himself. He'll not don't worry. God's all important, and it doesn't matter but I really can't understand it. The Equality Commission has went mad. This is a waste of money, a waste of time, a waste of the court's time.
Okay. Ian, thank you very much. I'll just pick on that with Fiona. The right to refuse service, for example, in a pub. Obviously, if somebody's drunk, they've had too much to drink, that applies. If someone looks like they're endangering other people with their behaviour, that applies. But a pub can't turn someone away and say, well, you're black, so we don't serve black people here. There are limits on that freedom of yes. the business owner, aren't there?
Yeah, and the legislation really stops you treating people less favourably than somebody else on the grounds of their religion or their race or their sexual orientation. So it's where you treat somebody less favourably. If you have two very drunk people and you only throw out the white one, for example, then you have a problem. But you cannot treat people less favourably just because they have a particular religion.
Thank you very much for that. Don, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, William.
Where do you stand on the conscience clause, the so-called Asher's clause, Don?
I would support it wholeheartedly, and I think Callum hit on the two words that's very important here: tolerance and respect. Now, I, as a Christian, have to tolerate, and I do tolerate somebody's right to live a homosexual life. That's the way I don't agree with it, but if they want to live that way, that's okay. So all I'm asking them to do is respect my right and tolerate my right to live as a Christian and have a conscience that I live my life as a Christian and according to my beliefs. And William, I think with tolerance and respect, this community, the two sides here could live perfectly well together. All we need is a bit of tolerance and respect, but it has to work both ways. This Equality Commission is only one-sided. It's pushing the rights of the homosexual community against the rights of the Christians, and that's where it's got it completely wrong.
I get your point, Don, but they say, and they're not here, so I'm saying this for them, but I wish they were here, but they haven't agreed to come onto the programme. But they say they're not pushing anything here. What they're doing is asking the court to decide if the law means what they think it means. Then we'll know for sure. It's a test case, essentially.
Well, that may be, but I think, it's going to still cost the Equality Commission a lot of money to take this thing to court, and while it's just common sense, and a wee bit of, I think Callum's, that's quite correct. Tolerance and respect, William, that guy who went to Asher's Bakery in the first place, Asher's maybe would have baked the cake. They just didn't want to put the slogan on it. So he could have went to lots of other bakers and did eventually go to another bakery and get the cake baked. So, he just had all I was asking him to do was respect the right of that company, they're Christians, to live their Christian life and work according to their beliefs. And we respect his right and his freedom to live their life of homosexual, if that's what he wants to do.
Don, thank you very much. Appreciate you call, Don. Very good. We've got Billy up as well. Hi, Billy. I keep saying people are up. No, they're not. They're on. You're on, Billy. Good afternoon, Billy.
No, I think I'm totally against this whole idea of a conscience clause, and it comes around to two or three different things. And one is small employers. I mean, if they want to, if they have the so-called Christian beliefs. I'm sorry, I didn't come across right. They hold Christian beliefs, and they don't want to employ gay people. I mean, it's going to end up them going to court as well. over that kind of discrimination.
Stay with us, Billy. I'll just ask Callum to pick up on that, because how far does this go? Billy's asking.
Okay.
Would you be saying that a Christian company might be able to say we don't employ gay people?
Well, the conscience clause for service providers is not about the employment and retention of staff. That's a very different area of law. And also, can I please make the point, this is not about refusing someone custom because of who they are. Asher's Baking Company serve sausage rolls, Cornish pasties, jam donuts, whatever confectionery to any customer, including people who practice homosexuality, including people of a different political background, of a different religion. They do not ask the views of the customers that buy their sausage rolls. But this cake was a campaign cake. It was the slogan on the cake that they could not in conscience endorse or agree with. So it's not, their conscience clause does not provide service providers with the opportunity to turn away a customer because they do not agree with a particular aspect of the lifestyle that they live. It's about endorsing a particular belief or principle or propaganda in the case of
Let Billy respond to that. Go ahead, Billy.
I sort of agree with that, but I thought that we already had established this whole idea of service providers in England in particular, where there was hoteliers wouldn't let two females or two males rent the same room, and these were small hoteliers, not hoteliers, bed and breakfast people, and I thought that had already been established in law. Now, the only question I would ask them is, does that case law not apply in Northern Ireland? I mean, we are still all part of the United Kingdom. We are all still using the same legislation, be it just changed slightly to adopt to each province. But I mean, surely we have already established it in law. The service provider is whatever. If you go to buy something, no matter what it is, whether it's a bed or whether it's a cake or anything else, surely that has already been established in law.
Billy,
I'm not disagreeing with the equality people going to court over this. It just sort of brings back to the point: does that not already apply?
Billy, thank you very much. Callum, can you also widen this? We don't want to just get into the Ashers discussion, but if a bakery owned and run by Christians had an order from the local mosque who wanted a cake to celebrate the end of Ramadan, the Eid festival, and they wanted Islamic imagery and language saying that there is no God but Allah on the cake, do you want this conscience clause to also mean that they don't have to take that order?
Well, I mean, you're dealing with two things here. You're asking, first of all, is a business prepared to serve Muslim customers? And yes, businesses should be and do, and Asher's Baking Company do. But if you're asking for a cake to be designed with Islamic slogans like support Sharia law, then should a feminist baker not be free to say?
You're changing the illustration.
Well, I mean, you've got to compare like with like. The support gay marriage slogan is about a political campaign. Marriage is not redefined in Northern Ireland at the present time, and this is that was a campaign cake. So you've got to compare it with a campaign cake as well. So say support Sharia law. Should you go to a baker?
Well, what's your answer to that then?
Well, I believe a feminist baker should be free to say, well, look, I'm happy to serve you as customers. I'm happy to serve you.
But I'm not going to make that cake.
Sausage rolls, but I'm not prepared to design and decorate a cake supporting the imposition of Sharia law.
Paul Given from the DUP, MLA Paul Given, is with us now as well. Hi, Paul. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I think you've been listening into some of our discussion on this. We're getting into sort of the details now, Paul, of how this could work in practice. What would be permissible under a conscience provision and what wouldn't be permissible? What's your understanding of how that could work in practice?
Well, there certainly has been considerable public interest in the Ashers case, and that has led to people having to look at what does the law actually say around this, and is there scope to enhance equality legislation, and that's something that I'm actively considering and believe that there will be merit in exploring that further, and I'll be doing that. But we have to take into account, for example, Baroness Hale and the comments she made as a Supreme Court judge in respect of the B&B, for example, that this is something that should be considered by government. Obviously, judges and courts have to operate within the legislative framework that Parliament establishes, and therefore it is for parliamentarians to consider that framework, and that is something that I think we do need to consider. But the Equality Commission's actions against a private small business using public funds has led to consternation. And if it was going to be fair, it really should fund the other side of the case if they're doing it as a test case. But they're not. So a private business is having to find the monies to fight this particular case. And
so you don't believe this is a test case?
Well, the Equality...
You don't believe that's their motivation?
The Equality Commission have decided to take a case which is unprecedented. And
that's why it's a test case.
And so why not then fund Asher's Bakery? But they haven't done that. They are using this case, public funds, to target a particular business which is private. And I think that is questionable in the way in which they have done that, in the way in which
it's private, but it's engaging with the public, so it's covered by our goods and services legislation. And
it's that goods and services legislation that I think we need to consider, because it does go. It is a much more broader issue than just the Asher's case. That has illuminated the issue for us, but there are other issues that we need to be considering as parliamentarians, and that's something that I plan to do.
Well, Paul, would you agree that with this conscience clause, and I think you are, in principle, supportive of the idea of, at least explore it, right? Let's not put it too strongly, but you want to explore the idea. Would you be comfortable with a provision in Northern Ireland that allowed someone to turn away business because they didn't like a religious slogan on top of a cake or stationery or something else? So a Christian stationer saying to the local mosque, we're not printing Islamic material.
And that's where I think it has to be down to requests for particular products or services that is going against someone's strongly held religious beliefs.
Well, that would be an example. If you had an evangelical Christian, for example, who said, I don't believe that Islam is a true way to God, and if the cake being requested or the stationery being requested, Paul, said there is only one God, it's Allah, they might say, I'm uncomfortable with that from my own sincerely held Christian point of view. I don't want to take that business. Do you think the conscience clause should protect that Christian business?
Well, that's something that we would need to explore. I have some sympathy with what Callum has said in respect of producing something that says I support Sharia law, and obviously that is something that a conscience clause would protect a small business owner from. Otherwise, we move in a society where anybody that holds particular beliefs needs to set that aside in terms of the private sector and the provision of goods and services.
But every time I ask this question about Islam, we keep changing it to something that's a more manageable question. Let me ask the question again, Paul. If someone asked for stationery which said there is only one God, Allah, and a Christian stationer said, I'm not taking that business, do you think a conscience clause should protect them?
That's something that I would be wanting to explore.
But in principle, would you like the law to protect that person?
Well, the principal position is a conscience clause. So if there are strongly held religious beliefs,
and that is one, that there is only one true religion, Christianity, that's as strongly a held Christian belief as you can have.
Yes, and if that is the conscience clause would want to protect people who have strongly held religious beliefs from going and acting against their conscience and affirming something. What would be wrong?
Well, that would be religious discrimination, wouldn't it?
What would be wrong is private businesses turning away individuals because they're a Muslim, turning away individuals because they're gay. That would be wrong, and I would oppose any change in the law to give effect to that. But what we're talking about are the provisions of services and goods to affirm something that goes against a strongly held religious belief. And I think in a tolerant, liberal society, surely there is room for people to have different views on this and for their conscience to be protected.
Why is it tolerant to say a Christian company should be able to turn away business because they don't like the religious language involved in the order?
Well, William...
Why, William, is it tolerant to say in a society because you have a religious belief, you're a Christian owner of a business, you're a Muslim owner of a business,
yes,
and somebody comes in and asks you to produce something that goes contrary to those strongly held beliefs?
I would have thought, Paul, that businesses get orders all the time which represent the diversity of worldviews that are in existence in Northern Ireland. The mere fact that you take an order doesn't mean you endorse everything involved in the order, right?
Well, That's your view, William, and that's obviously a...
Well, it's not my view. That is the case, isn't it? You're not endorsing anything simply by taking the order, are you?
Well, what you're wanting to do is ascribe your particular worldview on everybody else.
I'm not ascribing a worldview. I'm asking the question.
Well, my view is that we live in a liberal society, and that society needs to be tolerant of other people's beliefs, and that's the type of society that I want. And Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, if they're involved in provisions of services and someone comes in and places an order and that wants to affirm a particular view that goes against their strongly held belief, I think in a liberal society we need to be tolerant and provide the space to make a reasonable accommodation for people that hold those views. The fact of the matter is, in this case, there are other bakeries that would make this provision. So why go to one particular bakery, single it out because you know it has a particular ethos? And I think that's wrong.
And as you know, Paul, we don't know what the motivation of the person making the order was. They probably just walked into a bakery and made an order.
Well, what we do know is in other parts of the world, in America, there is now a case where a Christian has went in to a bakery run by gay people and asked for a product to say that marriage is only for a man and a woman, and that gay company has said we're not going to produce that, and now the Christians are wanting to take a case against the gay bakery. And I think, do we really want a society where we're going to constantly want to litigate and take people to court because they won't affirm a particular viewpoint that you hold to? And we used to be in a society where people were of the view of live and let live. Now it has moved beyond that, particularly from those advocating from an LGBT perspective, that it's no longer let us live our lives the way we want to live it. It's now you need to endorse our lifestyle. You need to affirm it. And if that means going against your conscience, well then the state should be taking that company to court because they're not affirming a lifestyle that we believe society should be accepting of. I don't think that's a liberal society. That's an intolerant one, and that's something that we need to address.
Paul, thank you very much. Paul Given from the DUP making an argument for a liberal society in Northern Ireland and suggesting that a conscience clause might be the best way to get that. What do you think? Would a conscience clause in the equality legislation be tantamount to a get-out-of-jail-free card for bigots? And we're not just talking about one example. I keep emphasising this now. This has big implications across all of our lives. I'll take a couple of calls. David, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, William. I'm a gay man, and I wanted to know what this is actually leading to, because at the end of the day, if I wanted to go to a hotel with my partner to spend a weekend away somewhere, then I've been told probably that's the Christian people that owns that. They can turn around and say, no, I can't give you a bed for yourselves and your partner who I've been with for 25 years. I can't do that. The police give us service. Does that mean if a gay person's home has been attacked, then the police officer can turn around and say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm sorry, I can't go to your house because I do not agree with your will?
No, it wouldn't mean that, David. Even if this conscience clause went through, it would only apply to private companies. It wouldn't apply to public bodies.
Where is it leading to, William? It's leading to a very dangerous situation here, where we're saying gay people can't go there, and the next thing will be the black community can't go there, the Chinese community can't go there. We're going down a very dangerous road, and I fully support the gay man on the cake, and I hope he has a very good court case, because this will actually nail this in the head that you cannot discriminate. Because you're a Christian, you cannot discriminate against someone because of their sexuality. It is an absolute disgrace.
Callum.
Okay, well, actually, you're not comparing like with like. Asher's Baking Company has not refused to serve a customer because of their lifestyle, because of their political beliefs or religion. They're happy to serve anyone, and they do serve anyone from their confectionery. They serve you Cornish pasties, you can buy sausage rolls, you can buy jam donuts. They will not discriminate against anybody on that basis. This cake is a campaign cake.
This cake
is a campaign
Callum,
cake, and it's a politicised slogan.
I want to hear more from you, but you keep making the same point every time I come to you.
Because it's an important point.
I know, but
it's
we
not
want to hear more from you, not the same point. Do you believe, because I haven't interviewed Asher's Bakery, I'd love to, but they won't take an interview. Do you believe that they would take an order for a wedding cake for a gay couple?
Well, you would need to ask Asher's
I'd love
Baking.
to ask them.
You would need to ask them that question. I can only speak for the cake that they have declined, and I only know the details of that. And when you look at that cake,
would you like a conscience provision to protect them if they chose not to?
Well, I think you've got to look at what's being proposed in a conscience provision. This is only an idea that has been raised within the last 24 hours. We've got to see the details of it before.
But in principle,
well, before I could comment on the details of it, I would need to know what was in that. Okay.
That's an awkward one for you, is it?
Well,
because that would look like discrimination.
Look, you're asking me to comment upon an item of legislation.
This is all
that
hypothetical.
It's absolutely hypothetical.
All of it is at this stage.
So I think it's helpful to talk about what we know and what we can see and what is actually happening.
You've
and
been
what
talking about
actually,
other hypothetical examples up to this one.
No, because you're pressing me on the point that is not the point that Asher's Baking Company are dealing with.
Fiona?
You're dealing with a politicised campaign.
Thank you, Callum. Fiona?
I think really, and what this case may well come down to is if you look at the words of the legislation, it's the provision of goods, facilities or services. So you may well serve the donut. That may be the provision of the goods, but the service was actually putting whatever the icing was on the cake. But taking it out of that, it is down to it's all aspects of the business. So, I think it's a bit difficult to pick or choose. And I think that's why the Equality Commission have taken this case. I mean, Paul Given said it's they've taken against a particular business. I think they've taken the particular issue, and the debate that we're having here shows that this issue needs to be teased out and tried or looked at in the court.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thanks to Callum. We've teased it out a bit. It is very hypothetical. We are into uncharted waters in terms of the equality legislation and opt-outs. And you are texting and tweeting. Thanks also to Brendan Duddy in Derry as well. You're texting and tweeting with your response to this. Let me give you a sense of some of those. On Twitter, Hugh says, there should not be discrimination against individuals, but there must be room for ethical and moral discernment. Rick says a protection for bigots. While they are entitled to their religious beliefs, they should not interfere with equality for all. Naomi, just use common sense. Why go out of your way to cause a scene by asking for a service from someone you know doesn't approve? Joe, does refusing to carry any political message constitute discrimination? It wasn't the cake, but a political slogan. And on text, Francis says, no need for conscience clauses here. Ashers put their foot in it. They gave their reason for not producing the cake. All they had to say was that they could not produce the cake. Manufacturers don't have to give reasons for not doing something. Not sure about that legally, but you may be right. Tim says, can the bakery not put up a sign saying that they reserve the right to refuse service? Well, they could put the sign up, but the question is whether the law would guarantee that that sign is accurate. Bernard says, the health minister said gays could not give blood. They're bringing those laws in. I know if I was lying dying at the side of the road and someone who was gay offered to give me blood, I would take it. And Graham says on this, an opt-out is just an opt-out for religious bigotry. You are divided. 81771. The texts continue. Thanks to all our guests on that one.